Hello, and welcome to the Yashua Pakar podcast. I'm your host, Yashua Pakar, and on today's episode, I would like to discuss the ongoing issue of food insecurity in the United States.
Soundstripe.
I would first like to answer the question that is, what actually is food insecurity? According to the United States Department of Agriculture, food insecurity can be defined as a lack of consistent access to enough food for every person in a household to live an active, healthy lifestyle. The Department of Agriculture also claims that this is an issue that affects more than 34 million Americans, which is around 1/10 of the whole U.S. population. Upon hearing this information, you may be asking yourself, why? Why should I care about this issue? What does this have to do with me? To answer this simply, I would like to say that every single person should care about this issue because of its effect on people and society. Some of the major effects of food insecurity include ramifications on health, childhood development, the environment, and social disparities. In today's installment of the podcast, I would like to address the effects that food insecurity has on health, childhood development, and social disparities. The first negative effect that I'd like to address is about how food insecurity can negatively affect the health and well-being of people. Within this topic, I first would like to clear up that food insecurity does not directly mean hunger. There are many people who are food insecure that are actually not starving, but lack resources in accessing food that is nourishing. When initially researching this topic, I found out that a lot of people who are food insecure suffer from obesity. According to an article written by Liping Pan titled "Food Insecurity is Associated with Obesity Among U.S. Adults in 12 States," explains that 1 in 3 food insecure adults are obese. Upon learning this information, I initially thought to myself, how is this possible? If people are starving and do not have access to food, how are they becoming obese? This misconception can be cleared by what I stated earlier, and that food insecurity is just the lack of nutritious, nourishing foods, and not just food in general. This then led me to my next question, which is, why do people opt to buy unhealthy foods instead of healthy foods? This question can be easily answered by the fact that oftentimes unhealthy foods are significantly cheaper than healthy foods. To fully put this in perspective, according to an article written by the Harvard School of Public Health, healthy eating costs around $1.50 more a day than unhealthy eating. Many food insecure people tend to buy processed frozen foods. According to grubbingamericana.com, the average cost of a frozen TV dinner is around $3 to $4. Comparing this to a meal that is made with individual and often healthy ingredients that you can pick out yourself, it is significantly more expensive than the frozen TV dinner. You honestly can't blame consumers for making choices like this, especially consumers who are living in poverty due to the convenience of these options. Despite all of this, however, food options like these are usually high in saturated fats, sugars, carbohydrates, and can often lead to weight gain and other health issues. I wanted to find out more information regarding this issue and eventually get testimony from the average everyday consumer. I decided to interview one of my mother's co-workers, Jane, who suffers from diabetes and obesity, and ask her a few questions about her daily routine when it comes to eating. Hello, Jane. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Yash. I am happy to be here today.
Glad to hear that. If you don't mind, I'm going to ask you a few questions about your eating habits.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
First of all, what does a typical breakfast look like to you?
I usually have a bowl of my kids' cereal in the mornings. If I'm running late, I'll just pick something up at McDonald's on the way to work.
Interesting. Now, what if I told you that starting your morning off with cereal can be one of the most unhealthy things that you could do?
Well, to be honest, the reason I buy it is because it's quick and cheap.
Interesting.
Honestly, I wish I could eat healthier.
Well, what is it that stops you from eating healthy?
Healthy foods are expensive. I can barely afford to pay my bills, let alone healthy food.
Do you feel like you can work at your absolute best on a diet like this?
Actually, after I eat like this, I'm usually hungry again an hour later. I find myself snacking on chips and candy just to stay awake.
Wow, that's very eye-opening. Thank you for coming on the podcast today and speaking with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
As you can see, this is a problem for a lot of people who are low income. You really cannot fault consumers for making choices based on their financial situations. The second effect of food insecurity that I'd like to address is its effect on childhood development. This ties into the health aspect of this issue, but I feel like this is an important part of the topic that deserves its own individual attention. Addressing health concerns first, according to an article titled Food Insecurity in Children, food insecure children are put at a greater risk of developing asthma and childhood obesity. Even before birth, future mothers who are food insecure are at risk of giving birth to babies that are low body weight and are more likely to experience maternal depression. Not only does food insecurity play a factor in the development of physical health, but also affects mental health and learning capabilities of developing children. In the same article, the writer states that many children who are hungry often have trouble staying awake and struggle to focus on the content that they are being presented with at school. A lot of the time, children who are food insecure are often iron deficient, which can put them at a disadvantage by the risk of negative cognitive, behavioral, and health consequences in the first years of life. The final effect that I will be discussing in today's podcast are the social disparities within the issue of food insecurity. I feel like this specific area of food insecurity doesn't come to mind when discussing this issue, but that's why I felt like it was necessary to touch on it. What if I told you that Black and Hispanic families experience food insecurity at a much higher rate than any other ethnic group in the United States? In an article titled New Poverty and Food Insecurity Data Illustrate Persistent Racial Inequities, the author says that the 2020 United States Census claims that 19.5% of Black families and 17% of Hispanic families experience food insecurity compared to the 8% that white families face. This can be explained by discriminatory practices that are put in place, such as certain kinds of employment discrimination. For instance, in the hiring process for jobs, studies show that white-sounding names are favored for interviews and callbacks compared to black-sounding names. For example, in a study titled Systemic Discrimination Among Large U.S. Employers, researchers sent out 80,000 fake job applications to Fortune 500 firms and found out, on average, the black-sounding names had a 10% less chance of getting a call back than an equal comparable application with a white-sounding name. This phenomenon can be observed on a lower level in poverty-stricken communities which have sizable Black and brown population, which can further explain why those communities face food insecurity at a much higher rate. Upon hearing all of this information surrounding food insecurity, I can only imagine, and hope of course, you are asking yourself, Yash, how can I help mediate the issue of food insecurity? What resources can I utilize? And to answer that, there are many great resources and organizations that are helping to fight this issue each and every day. One of these organizations that I found to be quite interesting is an organization called Feeding America. Feeding America prides itself as being the largest hunger relief organization in the United States. Their mission is to help mediate the issues of food insecurity and hunger in general. Their model of operation includes a network of food banks, food pantries, and community-based organizations in the United States. You can give one-time and monthly donations through their website at www.feedingamerica.org. What I like most about this website is that it has an easy user interface and also has a map of all of their food bank locations in the United States. So, if you are struggling with access to food, The organization provides the necessary information regarding that. The issue of food insecurity is an ongoing health issue that affects millions each and every day. I hope that on today's episode of the Yashua Pakar podcast, that I inspired those that are listening to take action and help solve this issue, whether it is volunteering, donating, or even just spreading awareness. This is not an issue that can be solved in a day's time, but with the contributions of caring people, this issue can be mediated each and every day. This has been the Yashua Pakar podcast, and I will see you all next time.